Welcome to College Station, Texas, home of Texas A&M University. Founded in 1876 as an all-white male institution of higher learning, the university has transformed into a world-class, nationally ranked university, welcoming all genders, races, and nationalities. However, the road to inclusion was not an easy one.
The Agricultural and Mechanical College of Texas, the university's original name, was established as the first public institution of higher education in Texas. It was created under the Morrill Land Grant Act to educate males in farming and military techniques.
Although blacks were not welcome as students, they were welcome as service providers. Many blacks worked as groundskeepers, cooks, etc. Perhaps the most notable worker was Dan Jackson, affectionately known as Uncle Dan at the university. Documents show that he worked at the university for 53 years and is likely to be the longest employee of A&M. Despite his service and other blacks' dedication to building Texas A&M University, they were still not allowed to contribute academically or experience any of the academic benefits. Instead, black students were encouraged to attend Prairie View University, the unequal institution of higher education for blacks in Texas.
I hope you didn't get mine. As other colleges and universities were slowly opening their doors to African Americans both before and after the Brown versus Board of Education decision, Texas A&M remained closed to them, maintaining their requirement of being a white male core participant for enrollment.
Under the leadership of General James Earl Rudder, Texas A&M transformed from a small land-grant college to a renowned university. It also experienced a series of changes that are responsible for the diversity of Texas A&M campus today. First, the requirement of membership in the Corps of Cadets was made optional. Although women were allowed to attend summer classes as early as 1911, Rudder opened the doors to them for full-time student admission.
He is also quietly responsible for racial integration at Texas A&M University. In the summer of 1963, the first African American students were quietly admitted as special students, including Leroy Sterling of Bryan, a Texas Southern University student at Houston HBCU. He enrolled for summer courses to graduate early from Texas Southern University. In his first attempt, he received a rejection letter stating that A&M was not admitting black students at that time. He later received an acceptance letter, becoming the first to apply and attend undergraduate classes here at Texas A&M. Several other Bryant residents enrolled that summer in both sessions, becoming the very first students of color to attend Texas A&M University. Several other Bryan residents enrolled that summer in both sessions, becoming the very first students of color to attend A&M, such as Bernard C. Evans, also a Texas Southern student, Frankie M. Morris, and Betty Sue Hanks. Clarence Dixon Jr., a graduate student, became the first African American to graduate from A&M, and Dr. James L. Courtney and Leon Green became the first black undergraduates to graduate from the university. Dr. James Courtney has been noted in talking about his struggle to endure name-calling, taunting, discrimination, and racial slurs as an A&M student. By 1967, black enrollment had increased to 35 and black students were actively being recruited for athletic teams, yet access to the teams was not equal.
As students at A&M, we are all familiar with the huge Aggie football culture. However, this culture was not always as inclusive to African Americans. In fact, the first African Americans to join the A&M football team, James Reynolds and Samuel Williams, were not allowed to travel with the team and barely played in the games, typically serving as special teams. In Reynolds' first attempt to join the team, he was rejected and sent an apology letter stating that the school was not ready to integrate football in 1966. Head football coach Gene Stallings was quoted as opposing integrating football, arguing that a Negro player did not fit into the plans of A&M right now.
Reynolds tried out again for the team in 1967, along with Williams, receiving much hostility from the head coach, Gene Stallings, and the coaching staff. Despite their experiences, Hugh McElroy was able to break ground as the first African American to serve as a starting player on the team. Today, Mr. McElroy still serves A&M as the Director for Institutional Advancement in the School of Rural and Public Health. We sat down with him to discuss his experiences as one of the first 4 African American athletes in Aggieland. Today we're meeting with Mr. Hugh McGorry, and he is class of 71, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his current position and his experiences as a student here in the 60s and early 70s. Mr. McGorry?
Currently, I have the privilege of working with the Texas A&M Health Science Center School of Rural Public Health. My title is Director of Institutional Advancement. My duties are that of a development officer looking to secure resources, funds, and nurture relationships that will benefit the school and the students.
Wow. Okay. So, learning about all of what you do now, can you tell us about what you did back in the 60s and early 70s?
Well, my degree was in industrial technology, College of Engineering, and my favorite courses back then were marketing, English, any writing courses, anything that dealt with people, and hence a lot of my background has been in sales and or human resources.
So what brought you to A&M initially? Was it for the degree or for sports? Or usually when people learn about A&M, they hear about the core, and so I'm interested in how you got to A&M.
Even though any notoriety that I've enjoyed as having been an Aggie is associated with sports, that definitely was not my reason for coming here. I came because at that time I thought I wanted to make the military a career, and obviously if a person wants to do that, then the Corps and those types of organizations are very attractive, and that's what brought me in.
So I want to know a little bit about your experiences. So getting here to A&M, how was that? What brought you here initially to Texas A&M University?
Well, let me clear the air first and say that I was not recruited. Okay, I was not recruited. In fact, I didn't even letter in high school in football. I played football at Houston Worthing and played behind a guy that some people may recall. His name is Clifford Branch. Clifford Branch was a very outstanding high school player, collegiate player, and then in the NFL. So we actually played the same position at every sport. So I never lettered in any sport in high school because of Clifford Branch. I came to A&M primarily intending to make the military a career. My family has a somewhat rich military background, and I thought, you know, that's what I needed to do to fulfill my family mission, so to speak. So I came without any scholarship or any thought of playing any sport whatsoever. I was playing in the quad with some of my friends, and they said, "Oh, you're pretty good. Why don't you go out for football?" So I said, "Okay, I'll go out." And I got hurt during spring training and was actually asked not to come back out. So then next year, playing with the same friends, and they said, "Hey, you're pretty good. You ought to go back out." So I went back out again, and this time I made the team and got a scholarship and all of that.
I do realize that there were actually two black students before you on the team.
Absolutely.
And there's a book I think I read, like Game of Life.
Sitting over there on the shelf.
Yes, I have the book as well. And he speak about, you know, these two people, Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Williams, were here before me, and they helped pave the way. So how was it? They were on the team when you were there, or
they? When I got here, they were both on the team, sorta. And when I say sorta, they got to dress out for home games. They never got to travel. They practiced just as hard, bled just as much, sweated just as much, but they didn't get to travel. And when the football team won the Cotton Bowl, you know, everybody theoretically gets to go to the bowl game. Right. They didn't get to go to the bowl game either. You draw whatever inferences you want to draw from that, but as far as I know, they were the only two that didn't get to go. That's not scientific research, but those are the things that kind of stick out. But Sammy and JT and I are really good friends, even to this day. In fact, I was talking to Sammy just a couple of days ago and saw them both over the holidays. And we'll see Sammy this evening, as a matter of fact. I'm going to muster in Richmond, Texas, Fort Bend County, and I'll see Sammy there. There's a gentleman that actually came up here with me from the same high school, Edgar Harvey. He and I went all the way through school together. When I say all the way, I mean all the way through A&M. And we buried him in December. And so I'm going to go meet his mom in at Fort Bend County, and we'll sit with her and answer the roll for him. Just on the sidebar, we buried him in December. We buried his wife in October. So anyway, we'll be there with them, and his daughter is class of '95. So.
Wow. Okay, so speaking on some of the football players, how was it on the team with the white students on the team and with the coaching staff? And
there were a couple of things that a couple of dynamics that were going on. There's more to how I got here. I had Edgar, as a matter of fact, the guy I mentioned a second ago, and one of our classmates, Sidney Sashry, were being recruited in track to come up. And again, I wasn't being recruited, but I had been accepted to the university. When they came up to visit during the summer, I just happened to ride up here with them, just hanging out. and we met another guy who was also being recruited in track, another black guy out of East Texas. And at the end of the visit, we all went our separate ways. And the guy from East Texas was really the crown jewel of the recruiting class. That's the one that the coaches really wanted. And toward the end of the summer, just before the beginning of the fall '67 semester, the Coach Thomas called this guy and said, "Who do you want to be roommates with?" And he said, "Well, I want to room with Sidney or Edgar." And he said, "Well, they went to high school, they've known each other all in their lives, they're going to be roommates." And he said, "What's your second choice?" And he said, "Well, what about the guy that was with them?" And they said, "What guy?" And they said, "Mac. You know Mac." And he said, "No, we don't know Mac. We're not recruiting a Mac." And he said, "Well, that's who I want to room with." Again, this guy was the crown jewel in recruiting. They said, "Okay, well, if that's who you want to room with, we'll see what we can do." So I get this phone call from the track coach, and he said, "Look, I don't have a scholarship, but if you want to stay in the track," I'm like, "Who is this?" and so I said, "Yeah, that's fine." So I came up, and this guy from East Texas, and I'm withholding his name on purpose, from East Texas, when he was selling the coach on being my roommate, or me being his roommate, he said, "Look, I heard he played baseball, he had a pretty good arm, I bet you with some training you could show him how to throw a javelin." So, okay, so I'm going to throw the javelin, right? Well, forget what you see on the Tarzan movies, it ain't that easy, all right? It does not come natural. But I had to run wind sprints, and the way track practice went is the field participants being, the jumpers, the throwers, and all of that, they worked out together, and then the sprinters worked out together. Theoretically, it's supposed to be the slow guys together and the fast guys together. Well, I was out running all of the field events guys, and quite a good number of the sprinters.
Wow.
So the coach said, "Well, why don't you forget about the javelin, why don't you come work on the sprints and the relays?" Well, the first meet of the season, I pulled a hamstring real bad. I was on crutches for a couple of weeks from a pulled hamstring. Now, that may not be as bad as it sounded then, but medical technology hadn't advanced to where it is now. But nonetheless, I was not able to run track anymore. And so I stopped running track, and that's when I went out for football, kind of deal. And then I hurt my leg again during spring training, as I said earlier. And the coach said, "I don't have stakes to feed a cripple, so why don't you not come back out?" Kind of thing. So that's how I went through that year. And then the following year, at the urging, I shouldn't say urging, I think I was just gullible. They made a suggestion and I went back out and then ultimately got a scholarship. Oh, by the way, that guy from East Texas, that was my roommate, and his name is Curtis Mills. Curtis set the world record in a quarter mile when we were sophomores. And he and his brother Marvin, who's class of '73, I believe, at one time were legitimately the fastest brothers in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
Wow.
So, but anyway, that's how And to answer your question about how I was treated, I gave you that background because when I went out for football, it was not that I was an unknown because they had known me from my association. You know how athletes just kind of hang out, regardless of the sport. So that made it a little bit different. Didn't erase everything that people grew up with, right. You know, but it made it a lot better. There were a couple of incidences that were not violent or physical in any way, but some things that could have been blown out of proportion had I chosen to take that route. But we didn't get there. One in particular, I believe, was, I want to say it was in '68, but it was during the time of the riots in LA. And there, of course, was a lot of news coverage, and that news coverage had fire hoses and dogs and sticks and stuff like that. And so we were sitting family style at the table eating dinner, and one of the guys said, say, man, did y'all see those cops beating that nigger? And so the other guys at the table, of course, I'm the only black sitting there, Sam and JT were gone. And the other guys at the table got real uncomfortable, and I just kept eating, and they kind of said, you know, like, Max down there, man. And so then he looked at me and he said, Matt, he said, man, I'm sorry. And I said, for what? And he said, oh, you didn't hear what I said? And I said, yeah, but you wouldn't apologize unless you thought I was a nigga. You know, so there's different ways of handling things without always resorting to violence, and that's the way I chose to deal with some of the stuff. But all in all, I would say that probably wasn't any worse than it would have been anywhere else, given the time and the situation and the environment.
Okay. What about the coaching staff? I think some of the earlier things that I read on Coach Stallings said initially he was very opposed to having Mr. Williams and Mr. Reynolds on the team. Later things that I've read says that he actually said he didn't see color, he just wanted good players, and so. Okay.
Well, I can't really attest to how he felt about them because I wasn't here when they initially went out.
Right.
Okay. I do know that several of the players that played with them thought that they should have gotten some playing time. Okay. If not playing time, then certainly travel time. If not travel time to a normal game, certainly at least get to sit on the bench at the Cotton Bowl. So now I've heard it said, and I haven't tried to document it, but I've heard it from a number of what I consider to be reliable sources.
Despite the reports of somewhat smooth dealings with students, black students still face difficulty getting the administration to nurture and openly support their presence and needs. In 1970, a group of 30 students, mainly members of the Afro-American Society, led a mass checkout of books on black history to protect. Although students were permitted to attend Texas A&M University in 1963, faculty integration lagged behind. In a 1961-62 discussion between President Rutter and Chancellor Harrington revealed lax willingness to hire Negro faculty, although policies were established to create equal opportunity. Harrington has been quoted stating that the policy was just on the books. In 1969, the very first African American faculty, Dr. Allie F. Mack, was hired as a political science instructor. She served as an Aggie faculty member for 3 years before moving on to Langston University. As we chatted with her on her life as the only black A&M faculty member in the 1960s, we learned that it was quite the experience.
When she picked up the phone to call the chairperson, she said, Mrs. Black is here.
Oh my God.
That was my first experience in the department.
Wow.
It was a racist. It was you know. And then in my class, we were having discussions on something. I can't remember what the discussion was on. And there was a student. It had to do, I'm sure it had to do with civil rights or something. And there was a student in the class who said, well, I wouldn't be in this class, but the only reason I'm in class is because they put me in this class.
Wow.
It was like it wasn't that he would have been somewhere else, definitely.
Wow. Now, what kind of classes did you teach? They didn't teach race there, though.
No. This is political science. When you're talking political science, you're talking about, you have to talk about civil rights.
Oh.
And the civil rights movement and that kind of stuff, you know?
So this is a basic American
government, you know, that kind of thing.
So did you get to teach any of the black students then?
There really weren't any black students.
Yeah, I realized. I think maybe there were
some students from other countries. I remember in a class, the first day of class, went into a class. There was one person from Palestine and one person from Israel. And the student from Palestine, when he realized there was a student in there from Israel, he stood up and said, "You stole my country!" and stormed out of the room and never came back.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So they had international students, but probably seven maybe black students. Because I think in 1967, I think they graduated their first 2 black students. But
my husband was a graduate in biochemistry and nutrition.
Oh.
He was
Even though A&M was open to black students, their portion of the student population remained below 1% until the 1980s, after the U.S. Civil Rights Office ordered the university to improve black enrollment and retention by 1987 as part of its desegregation plan. The university system created the Black Student Retention Committee to meet this charge. During that period, Texas A&M University saw its African American student population rise as high as 1,061 students. However, it did not meet the agreed desegregation plans by 1987. Marie Nuttall was a student during this period of change for Texas A&M University. In a personal interview, she noted that the African American student population was fairly small, but estimated the minority population to be around 20% during her time at A&M. Despite the small number of African American students and limited support from black students, Nuttall found the atmosphere at Texas A&M to be welcoming and inviting. She never felt discriminated against because of her color or unwanted on campus. In fact, she found the most assistance among students not of the same race. However, she also found it to be difficult to meet people within her race. In an effort to meet more black people, she became a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated in 1987. By the closing of the decade, there were 1,202 black students on campus.
In 1996, Hopwood versus State of Texas was decided, in which schools were prohibited from using race as a major factor in college admissions to boost minority enrollment. The decision prompted A&M to no longer use race and ethnicity for admissions in grants and scholarships. This has resulted in the different racial dynamic on campus today. As of fall 2010, African American students made up about 4% of the student population, including graduate students.